We are.
Usually we grab a stack of recent articles or maybe a new bestseller and we just tear through it. But today,
I know.
today we are blowing the dust off something really special. We are, I think, starting a journey.
It really feels that way. It's less like we're just reading a book and more like we're packing our bags for an expedition into into the absolute unknown.
Exactly. We are diving into a true cult classic, a book that has been, I think it's fair to say, infuriating scientists and delighting the curious for over a century. We are talking about The Book of the Damned by Charles Hoy Fort.
Published way back in 1919.
Right, 1919. And before anyone reaches for the skip button thinking this is going to be some dry history lesson, let me just stop you right there.
Yeah.
This book is, well, how would you describe it? It's a catalog of the weird.
It is. It's a collection of things that science, and he means dogmatic, rigid, early 20th century science, just flat out refused to look at.
It's written with this energy.
Oh, it's a fascinating text. It's dense, it's poetic, and at times it's almost, frantic. Fort writes like a man who has discovered a secret that the rest of the world is desperately trying to suppress.
It's so dense.
Yeah.
But because of that, we made a decision. We are not going to try to swallow this whole thing in one bite.
No, that would be impossible. You get indigestion. So we're splitting this deep dive.
This is part one. Our mission today is to do a deep dive specifically into the first half of the book. We are covering chapters I through 13th.
Right.
We're going to lay the philosophical groundwork because you really, really need that to understand what comes later. And then we're going to look at what I'm calling the terrestrial anomalies, the stuff falling from the sky.
The frogs, the snows, the red rains, the things that actually hit the ground.
Exactly. We are purposefully saving the big cosmic stuff, the giant planets, the weird lights, the shadows on the moon, for the next deep dive. Today, we keep our feet on the ground, mostly.
Or at least we look at the things that are hitting the ground from somewhere else.
A very good distinction. So let's jump right in.
Yeah.
The title, The Book of the Damned. It sounds incredibly ominous. Is this a horror story?
Well, in a way it is. It's a horror story for a certain type of rigid academic mind. But Fort is very clear right from the opening lines. He is not talking about religious damnation. This isn't about souls burning in hell.
Okay, so who or what are the damned?
The data. It's the facts, the observations. Fort defines the damned as the excluded. He has this incredible mental image of a procession of data, thousands of reports of strange phenomena marching like an army of the accursed.
He has that incredible quote right at the start, a procession of the damned. By the damned, I mean the excluded.
Precisely. That is his central thesis. He argues that science, and he always uses it with a capital S, has created a system. And like any system, to function, it has to define what's inside and what's outside.
Okay.
So it accepts the data that fits its theories, that's the chosen data, but the data that contradicts those theories, the data that's messy or weird or just inconvenient, that gets damned. It gets excluded.
It's like a very exclusive country club. If you don't wear the right tie, you don't get in. Even if you are real, even if you exist outside the door, you're just ignored.
That's a perfect analogy. It's absolutely perfect. And Fort casts himself as a guy standing outside the club, picking through the dumpster, finding these little diamonds and screaming at the members, "Hey, why did you throw this away?" He's gathering the battalions of the accursed to march against the fortress of dogma.
So before we get to the reigning meat, and yes, everyone, we are going to talk about reigning meat, we have to unpack his worldview because he doesn't just list weird stuff. He builds this whole philosophical framework to explain why we ignore it. He calls it Intermediatism.
Yes. And this is crucial. If you don't get Intermediatism, you don't really get Fort. You might just think he's a crank, just listing weird trivia.
Right.
But he's actually challenging the fundamental way we think about reality itself. He's taking on the whole idea of positivism.
Okay, let's unpack this a little. Positivism is the idea that things are real, definite, that they can be known for sure.
Right. Positivism is the default setting for most of us, especially in the modern world. It's the idea that we can draw a sharp line between things. White versus black, true versus false, animal versus vegetable, real versus unreal.
The kind of thing science loves. Classifying things, putting them in distinct boxes.
Exactly. We crave that clarity. It makes us feel like we understand the universe.
But Fort argues that this is just an illusion.
He argues that in our state of existence, which he calls a quasi-state, nothing is absolute. Everything is intermediate. There are no hard lines in nature. We just invent them because it's convenient.
He uses that analogy of the cheese, right?
Yeah.
This one really stuck with me when I was reading chapter 1. I had to read it a few times.
It's unforgettable, isn't it? He says, all things are like a mouse and a bug in the heart of a cheese.
A mouse and a bug and a cheese. It sounds like the start of a really bad joke.
It sounds totally absurd, but think about what he's saying. To us, the mouse and the bug seem completely different. They are distinct entities. One has fur, one has an exoskeleton, one's a mammal, one's an insect.
Totally separate categories.
But if they stay in that cheese long enough, eating it, living in it, breathing it, they are both just transmutations of cheese. They are different expressions of what he calls the all-inclusive cheese.
So he's saying that everything connects. That if you zoom out far enough, or I guess zoom in deep enough, the surface difference is just, they melt away. It's all the same stuff.
Precisely. He argues that science is like someone going to the ocean and drawing a circle in the water with their finger. And they say, see? The water inside this circle is positively different from the water outside.
But it isn't. It's absurd.
Of course it isn't. It's all just one continuous ocean. The waves flow in and out. His point is you can't separate the damned data from the accepted data because they're part of the same continuity. It all flows together.
So when a scientist says that fact is impossible, Fort says, nothing is impossible. It's just a different part of the cheese you haven't tasted yet.
Exactly. He argues that science tries to find truth with a capital T, an absolute positive truth. But all we can ever really find is intermediateness. We find things that are sort of true, or true for now, or true from one perspective, but not another.
He even takes a shot at Darwin, which, I mean, that takes some guts in 1919.
He does, and it's such a brilliant biting point. He notes that Charles Darwin wrote a book called The Origin of Species, the absolute Bible of biology, yet Darwin himself could never actually define what a species is.
Because where do you draw the line? Where does one species end and another one begin?
Exactly. It's a gradient. It's continuous. Evolution is a slow flow from one thing into another. But science acts as if there are hard borders. This is a dog. This is a wolf. Fort says we are hypnotized by these beliefs.
Hypnotized.
Yes, that's his word. We think we've found the truth, but we've just found a way to organize our own ignorance that makes us feel comfortable and in control. He says we were once hypnotized by theology, and now we're just hypnotized by science. It's just a new dogma.
It's like we've been hypnotized into seeing these boundaries that aren't actually there in reality.
And Fort is the guy in the audience who's here to snap his fingers. He wants to wake us up from this trance. And the way he does it is by introducing us to the procession of the damned. He basically says, okay, you think nature is orderly, you think the sky is empty, look at this.
So let's start the parade.
Yeah.
Chapters I through 3rd really focus on this stuff falling from the sky that shouldn't be there. And he starts with something really simple, rain. But obviously not normal rain.
No. Colored rains, black rains, red rains, yellow rains.
Let's talk about the black rains first. Now, if I'm playing devil's advocate here, it's the early industrial age. There's soot, there's smoke everywhere. If I see black rain, my first assumption is just, it's soot.
And that is exactly what the orthodox explanation, what Fort calls the scientific establishment, always said. Oh, it's just smoke. Or maybe volcanic dust.
Okay, that seems reasonable.
It does, on the surface. But then Fort does what he does best. He looks at the damn details. Let's look at the case from Slains, Scotland.
Yes, the Slains wreckers.
This was over a period of years, around 1862 to 1864. There were repeated reports of black substances falling during storms. Now, the scientists said, it's smoke from factories.
But wait, Slains is in rural Aberdeenshire. In 1862, were there a lot of massive factories pumping out black smoke right next door?
That is Fort's entire point. He looks at the data that gets excluded. He notes that this fall was incredibly localized. The reports say it fell precisely over one parish, one specific small area. And Slains is far, far removed from the great manufacturing centers of Britain at the time.
So let's just trace the logic here. If it was smoke from a factory in, say, Manchester or a volcano in Italy,
right,
it would have to travel hundreds, maybe thousands of miles.
It would.
And it would have to skip over London, skip over York, skip over Edinburgh, stay suspended in the air as this tight little package, and then decide, okay, here's the parish of Slains, time to dump everything right here.
It completely defies the physics of atmospheric dispersion. Smoke spreads out, it gets thinner, it doesn't travel in a tight invisible ball and then drop on a single village. Fort calls this the Intermediatist method. He accepts the data that science throws away. Science says it must be smoke because extraterrestrial black rain is impossible. Fort says But the data says it fell only here, and there's no logical terrestrial source.
There was another one that sounded even weirder. The shower of ink.
Yes, at the Cape of Good Hope, South Africa, August 14th, 1888, a rain so black, so dense, that it was described in the contemporary reports as a literal shower of ink.
And again, the scientists probably said, oh, a volcano somewhere.
They almost always do. Volcanoes are the get-out-of-jail-free card for weird atmospheric phenomena. But Fort again points out the sheer distances involved. And he raises this really disturbing idea. What if the smoke isn't from here?
You mean not from Earth?
Fort is very careful. He almost never jumps straight to Little Green Men. He's much more subtle and I think more interesting than that. He just asks us to consider continuity.
The cheese again?
The cheese again. If smoke can come from a factory and smoke can come from a volcano, why can't smoke come from somewhere else? Somewhere extra mundane.
Extra mundane, I like that phrase. Outside the world.
He suggests that we can't easily draw that hard line between terrestrial smoke and cosmic smoke. If there is smoke falling, it implies combustion. If there's combustion happening above our atmosphere, what is burning?
That is a spooky thought. We look up and see a dark cloud, and we just assume it's water vapor. Fort looks up and wonders if someone is burning coal on some kind of super construction hovering 10 miles up.
He does love the idea of super constructions. He envisions the sky not as this empty, serene space, but as a busy, maybe even industrial place. But before we get to the really solid stuff, we have to talk about the red rains. Chapters 4 through VI get a little gross.
Yeah, this is the gore factor he brings in. I have to say, reading these accounts, I was kind of checking my umbrella. It's one thing to have black, sooty rain. It's another thing entirely to have rain that looks like blood.
It's a recurring phenomenon throughout history. The rains of blood, Pliny the Elder wrote about them. The Middle Ages were absolutely full of these reports, usually seen as terrible omens.
And I assume science has a neat explanation for this, too.
Of course. The standard explanation is red dust, or sand from the Sahara Desert, picked up by the wind, carried high into the atmosphere, and then it mixes with water and falls as red rain.
And Ford admits that sometimes, yes, it probably is sand. He's not totally unreasonable.
Right. This is important. He is not a fanatic. He admits that red dust exists. But then he brings out the cases that do not fit the sand hypothesis. He talks about the fall of thick, viscous red matter at Ulm in 1812, or the one at Châtillon-sur-Seine in 1669.
Viscous. That's a key word. That means sticky, gooey. Sand mixed with water is just mud. It's not gooey.
Exactly. And the reports often mention an odor, a putrid smell, the smell of decay. Sand doesn't smell like rotting flesh.
And then we have the absolute classic of the genre. I think this is my favorite story in the whole first half of the book, the Kentucky meat shower.
It is legendary. March 1876, a sunny day in Bath County, Kentucky.
Completely clear sky, no clouds, blue sky. And suddenly, flakes of what was described as flesh start falling onto a farmyard.
And when we say flesh, we aren't talking about dust. We're talking about chunks. Some were described as being 3 to 4 inches square.
That's a steak, a small steak, but still.
It's a significant amount of biological matter. Some reports said it looked like lung tissue, others said muscle tissue. And here is where the scientific method of the 19th century gets really, really interesting. What did the locals do?
They tasted it. I cannot get over that part.
They tasted it.
Hey, look, unidentified meat is falling from a clear sky. Let me put it in my mouth. It truly was a different time. So what was the verdict from these brave connoisseurs?
They declared it to be mutton or venison.
So deer meat or sheep meat, falling from a clear blue sky.
Now, the official explanation, the one that got written into the textbooks to make this whole embarrassing problem go away, was no stock.
No stock. That's a type of algae, right? Or bacteria?
Yes. It's a cyanobacteria that forms these jelly-like colonies on the ground. The theory is that it dries up, becomes these invisible flakes, blows around, and then when it rains, it swells up and looks like jelly.
Okay, that sounds vaguely plausible for something gelatinous.
Yeah.
But for meat. And Ford points out a huge gaping hole in this theory.
A couple of them, actually. First, nostoc swells up in rain. It needs water. The Kentucky meat shower happened on a clear, sunny day. Why would dried algae suddenly swell up into mutton-tasting chunks in the complete absence of moisture?
It makes absolutely no sense.
And also the whirlwind theory. If we are going with the up and down explanation, why would a whirlwind select only chunks of venison? Did it raid a butcher shop and then carefully sort the meat from the bones in the wrapping paper before dropping it?
That is the problem of segregation, isn't it?
Yes, and we will see Fort hammer on this point again and again and again. Whirlwinds are messy, they are chaotic, they pick up dust, twigs, leaves, mud, water. They don't pick up only pork chops, they don't pick up only algae.
So this is where Fort starts to hint at one of his biggest ideas. He tentatively introduces this concept of the Super Sargasso Sea.
This is one of his most famous and most bizarre concepts. He imagines a region high above the Earth, maybe it's stationary, maybe it rotates with us, where things just accumulate.
Like the Sargasso Sea in the Atlantic Ocean collects seaweed and driftwood and old shipwrecks.
A cosmic junk drawer, that's a great way to put it, a region of stasis. Maybe there are vast fields of cosmic slime up there. Maybe there are pockets of organic matter floating around. And occasionally a storm down here or some other disturbance dislodges something up there and it drops.
Hence the star jelly.
Yes. He connects it to the folklore of Pudracer, which literally means the rot of the stars, this gelatinous goo that people have reported finding on the ground for centuries. Science dismisses it as frog spawn or algae, nostoc again.
But Fort asks, what if it's the shedding of some huge biological thing hovering above us?
Yeah. That is a profoundly disturbing mental image. The idea that the sky has dandruff or shedding skin.
Or waste products.
But it's not just the organic, gooey stuff, right? Chapter 6 gets into the inorganic, the manufactured stuff.
Right, and this is where it gets really, really hard for the whirlwind theorists to keep up. We have reports of slag, cinders, coal, and even something called punk falling from the sky.
Punk being like tinder, amadou, a kind of fungus or rotten wood used for starting fires.
But let's stick to the cinders and slag.
Yeah.
There's a case he brings up involving a French scientist, Professor Dobray. He was analyzing ashes that fell in the Azores.
The Azores, so islands in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, about as isolated as you can get.
Very isolated. And Dobray, a respected scientist of his time, claimed that these ashes came from the Great Chicago Fire.
The Chicago Fire, as in Illinois, America.
Yes, he seriously proposed that the ashes floated from Chicago across the entire American continent out over the Atlantic Ocean and then fell specifically on the Azores.
That's stretching credulity to its breaking point. Fort mocks this mercilessly. He just has a field day with it. He looks at the distances involved, thousands of miles. He looks at the quantity of ash that fell. It's such a desperate explanation. It's science trying to force the data to fit the theory at all costs. The logic is it's ash, therefore it must be from a terrestrial fire. Where was there a big fire recently? Chicago. Okay, problem solved. It came from Chicago.
It's the circle in the ocean again. Real ash comes from earth fires. Therefore, this ash must be from an earth fire, even if it has to travel thousands of miles, probably against the prevailing winds.
And Ford also points out all these strange inclusions. He lists case after case of hailstones that contain things they shouldn't. Hailstones that contain salt or pyrites or sulfur.
Or coal. He mentions coal falling from the sky.
Or coal. And if coal falls from the sky, Ford asks the obvious and very provocative question, are there coal-burning super constructions up there?
We are back to the aerial battleships and celestial factories.
Or at least something that generates industrial waste. Slag is the waste product of smelting metal. If slag falls from the sky, it implies a furnace somewhere up there.
That is a perfect transition to Chapter 7, because if you think coal is weird, let's talk about the menagerie. Frogs, fish, snails.
The classic raining cats and dogs, though in reality it's usually frogs and fish.
This is the kind of stuff that always shows up in cartoons or, tabloid papers. But Ford has stacks and stacks of sources on this, doesn't he?
Stacks. And he's not quoting tabloids. He's quoting the Scientific American, he's quoting Nature, the London Times, French scientific journals. He's quoting the respectable publications of the day that are reporting these things as genuine, if baffling, curiosities.
And the standard explanation is always the whirlwind, right?
Always, without fail. A whirlwind or a waterspout sucks up a pond, carries it for miles, and then drops the contents somewhere else.
Which, okay, I can see that happening on a small scale. A tornado is an incredibly powerful thing. You can pick up a car, so why not a pond?
It is physically possible, yes. Fort doesn't deny that whirlwinds exist, but he brings up his smoking gun argument again, segregation.
Okay, break that down for us one more time.
If a whirlwind sucks up a pond, what is actually in a pond?
Everything. Water, mud, frogs, fish, tadpoles, sticks, weeds, maybe an old tire.
Exactly. It's a complete mixture. A whirlwind is like a blender. It's not a filter. But in these reports, the data consistently shows falls of only frogs, or only fish of a particular species, or only periwinkles.
Right. It's never, it rained a pond today. It rained frogs.
He cites a case in Birmingham in 1858, a shower of inanimate stones, just stones. Wolverhampton, 1860, a shower of little pebbles, London, 1838, a fall of little toads.
Just toads. No water, no mud from the pond they supposedly came from.
The reports often describe them falling on dry ground or falling with clean rain but no other debris. Fort argues that a whirlwind is a chaotic force. It mixes things up. It doesn't act like some kind of celestial sieve that carefully separates the adult frogs from the tadpoles and the water weeds before dropping them.
That is a really, really strong point. If I dump a bucket of pond water out my window, I don't just get the fish hitting the ground below. I get the whole disgusting mess.
And Fort pushes it even further. He doesn't just critique the old theory. He suggests a new one. He suggests migration.
Migration?
Yeah.
Like birds flying south for the winter.
Exactly. He speculates that maybe these aren't just violent displacements of Earth animals. Maybe they are migrating through the Super Sargasso Sea, or maybe they're falling from some specific source that breeds them up there. He notes that often the frogs or fish in a fall are all the same size. Little toads, little frogs, they're homogeneous.
Like a batch from a hatchery?
Like a batch, yes. If a whirlwind hits a pond, you get big frogs, grandpa frogs, baby frogs, the whole family. But these falls often have a uniformity that suggests, well, it suggests selection or a single hatchling event.
Or a specific breeding cycle happening in this weird sea above our heads.
Precisely. And let's not forget the insects. He mentions a fall of snails in Cornwall in 1886. The report described them as myriads.
Myriads of snails raining down. That's a nightmare.
And ants. Wingless insects falling from the sky. Fort has so much fun with the scientists here. He points out the absolute absurdity of their logic. He says if scientists are forced to admit that fish fell, they have to turn around and claim the fish were on the ground in the first place?
The old, it didn't really happen defense. Gaslighting.
Right. You didn't see them fall, you just saw them on the ground after the rain. They must have just walked there.
Fish walking.
Well, maybe they were migrating overland from another pond. Or maybe a flock of birds dropped them all at once. But millions of them, all at the same time, over one specific area. Fort just mocks this desperation to save the theory. He says scientists would rather believe in armies of ambulatory fish marching through the streets of London than admit something unexplained fell from the sky.
It really just goes to show how powerful that hypnosis is. We will believe a completely impossible explanation walking fish rather than entertain the damned explanation raining fish.
That's it in a nutshell.
Okay, moving on to chapters 8 through 11. We're going from the soft, squishy things to hard, dangerous things. Thunderstones and artifacts.
Thunderstones are fascinating because they sit right on that boundary line between folklore and science, which is a place Fort loves to play in. For centuries, maybe millennia, peasants all over the world claim that during thunderstorms, stone axes would fall from the sky.
And for just as long, scientists said, you crazy peasants, those are just Neolithic tools, ancient axes you found in the mud, because the heavy rain washed the dirt away.
Correct. For the longest time, the scientific dogma was stones do not fall from the sky, period.
But then...
meteorites happened.
Exactly. Science was eventually dragged, kicking and screaming, into admitting that stones do fall from the sky. Meteorites are real. So Fort asks the logical next question. If natural, unworked stones can fall, why is it so impossible that worked stones can fall?
Worked, meaning shaped by intelligence, like tools. Yes. Fort adopts his intermediatist view here. He suggests the peasants are partly right and the scientists are partly wrong. He points to what he calls the exotic stone argument. There are numerous instances where a stone axe is found after a storm, but it's made of a type of stone that geologically does not exist in that entire region.
So, if I find a greenstone axe in Jamaica right after a thunderstorm, but there is no native greenstone anywhere in Jamaica.
How did it get there? Did an ancient human carry it across the ocean thousands of years ago and then lose it right there? Maybe, but if it fell during the storm?
It implies a source up above that has tools, or is dropping tools.
And that leads us right into the damned artifacts.
Yeah.
Chapter 11 is just full of these Paleolithic poltergeists, as we might call them today. Manufactured objects found in geologically impossible places.
Like inside a solid lump of coal.
Inside deep coal seams, yes. or inside undisturbed layers of clay. He brings up the case of the Illinois coin.
Oh, I have the notes on this one. It was found something like 114 to 125 feet deep in the earth during a well boring operation.
Right. In a drill boring in Illinois, a little copper object that looked like a coin.
And it was sent to the Smithsonian for analysis. What did they say?
This is Fort's favorite part. They called it a quasi-coin.
A quasi-coin. What on earth does that even mean?
Fort loves this. He mocks it relentlessly. He says, "What is a quasi-coin? It implies the universe is trying to make money, but keeps failing."
It's the cheese analogy again. It's not quite a rock and it's not quite a coin. It's something in between.
Exactly. It's a way of damning the data without calling the discoverer a liar. But to Fort, it's evidence of a visitation or a fall. If a coin is found over 100 feet down, either humans with coins were there millions of years ago when that soil was laid down, or the coin fell from above with such force it embedded itself deep in the earth, or our entire understanding of geology is wrong. Science hates all three of those options, so it damns the datum. It calls it a hoax or a quasi-coin and moves on.
There was also the marble print, wasn't there?
Yes, the report of an impression of a human foot complete with sandal straps found inside a solid block of marble.
And the iron wedge found inside a lump of coal in Scotland.
These are the things that really keep geologists and archaeologists up at night. If that wedge is genuinely inside a lump of coal, that coal is hundreds of millions of years old. Was there a blacksmith on Earth before the dinosaurs? Or did the wedge fall from the sky into the primeval swamp that eventually became the coal seam?
If coal falls from the sky, are there coal-burning superconstructions up there? It all keeps tying back together.
It connects. Ford is building a world for us, brick by brick. A world where the sky is not empty space, but a busy, messy, populated place that occasionally drops its trash on our heads.
Which brings us to the last section for today, chapters 12 and 13. Geography, poltergeists, and the unassimilable. This feels like a weird combination of topics.
It does on the surface, but Fort connects them through the idea of confusion and exclusion. He starts by noting that the early explorers of Earth were constantly confused. They think Florida was part of Asia, or that Newfoundland was an island when it was actually a peninsula.
The early maps were a mess.
The maps were a mess because the data was incomplete. Fort suggests modern astronomers are doing the exact same thing with the worlds near Earth. We assume space is this vast, empty vacuum. He calls it homogeneous, but he argues it might be crowded. There might be other lands up there that we're misidentifying as planets or comets or just dismissing as empty space.
And he mentions the vitrified forts. What's that about?
Yes, these are real archaeological sites in Scotland and Ireland. Ancient forts where the stone walls look like they were melted. The stones are fused together by some kind of intense, incredible heat.
And back then, they didn't have blast furnaces that could melt solid stone walls.
So what did it? An unusually powerful bolt of lightning, that's the standard theory.
Right.
Or was it an attack with something shooting at them from above with a heat ray? Fort just leaves the question hanging there to unnerve you.
And then, poltergeists. Chapter 13. Usually when you hear the word poltergeist, you think ghosts, spirits throwing plates around a haunted house.
Fort isn't a fan of the spirit explanation. He thinks it's just another easy, non-scientific answer. But he connects the poltergeist phenomenon to his falling stones.
The stone-throwing aspect.
Exactly. There are thousands of reports throughout history of houses being bombarded by stones that seem to come from nowhere, stones that are sometimes reported to fall slowly or move in impossible curves.
He talks about the Cheadle instance in 1841.
Yes, stones falling on one specific house over and over. Fort calls this the ultimate damn data because it seems mischievous. It seems absurd and personal. Science can't handle mischief. Science needs universal laws, gravity, predictability. A stone that floats through a window and then gently drops on a dinner table violates everything science holds dear.
The science just ignores it. It didn't happen. Neighborhood kids must have thrown them.
Precisely. But Fort links this back to his hailstone connection. He talks about reports of hailstones that contain freak inclusions, pieces of stone, pyrite, even paper-like substances.
Paper-like. Inside a hailstone.
Yes. If a hailstone forms around a piece of what looks like paper, where did the paper come from?
It was floating around in the Super Sargasso Sea.
That is his tentative conclusion, that these poltergeist phenomena might not be ghosts at all. They might be leakages, debris falling from that stationary region above us. And maybe they target specific spots because that's where the leak is in the roof of the world.
It is a wild, wild theory. But when you stack it all up, the black rain, the red jelly, the segregated frogs, the worked stones, the coins deep in the earth, It really does paint a picture.
It creates a mosaic, and that is Fort's genius. Any single one of these stories could be dismissed. Oh, that was a hoax. That was a misidentification. That was a lie. But when you put hundreds and thousands of them together, when you have a procession of them, as he calls it, it becomes much, much harder to just look away.
So we have reached the end of part 1.
Yeah.
We have covered the terrestrial stuff,
right,
the atmospheric stuff. We've gone from the philosophy in chapter 1 right through to the poltergeists at the end of chapter 13.
We have. And in doing so, we've looked at the trash bin of science and realized there seems to be a pattern in the trash. Fort is asking us to stop looking at the clean, polished theories on the shelf and start looking at the messy reality on the floor.
He's telling us that the sky isn't just air and vacuum. It's a super Sargasso Sea. It's a place where frogs and fish might hang in stasis, where strange dust accumulates, where unknown civilizations might be dumping their slag and their garbage.
It fundamentally changes how you look up at the sky. You don't just see blue emptiness anymore. You see a potential ocean of debris, just waiting for a storm to knock some of it loose.
But as completely wild as all this is, Ford is basically saying we're just warming up.
Oh, this was just the warm-up. We've stayed relatively close to home. Frogs, rains, stones, these are things we know, just behaving badly.
But next time we go much further.
Next time we leave the atmosphere behind. We're going to tackle chapter 4 onwards. Fort takes on the astronomers. He takes on the planets themselves.
And if stones and frogs are falling, what about worlds? What about giants?
What about things that cast giant, unexplained shadows on the moon? What about strange triangular lights seen in the oceans of space? The second half of the book takes this intermediatist philosophy and applies it to the entire cosmos. And if you thought raining meat was weird, just wait until you hear what he has to say about Mars and Venus.
I cannot wait. This has been a mind-bending dive, and we're only halfway down. Thank you so much for joining us on the English BookCast. Keep looking up.
But maybe wear a helmet.
Good advice. We will see you next time for part 2 of our deep dive into the Book of the Damned.
Goodbye for now. Imagine a street at night. I want you to really picture this. It's late, maybe the middle of the night. The street isn't in a nice neighborhood. It's been torn up for repairs. There are piles of cobblestones, confused heaps of debris, maybe some old tools lying around. It's a mess, and it is pitch black.
A classic setting.
Right. Now, in the middle of this chaos, imagine a watchman. He's standing there on guard duty, and he's holding a lantern.
But it's a small lantern. A really weak one.
Exactly. It's got a weak little flame. So this watchman, he can only see what falls specifically within that tiny circle of light cast by his lantern. He sees a few paving stones, he sees a shovel, maybe he sees a stray cat wandering through.
Yeah.
And because that is all he can see, he concludes that this is all there is.
Yeah.
He tells himself the universe is made of paving stones, shovels, and stray cats.
He mistakes the limit of his vision for the limit of reality.
Precisely. But just outside that circle, just, 2 feet into the darkness, there are bonfires raging, there are matches being struck, there are house fires, there are people fighting. There is a whole chaotic, massive universe of activity happening in the blackness that he completely misses because he is so fixated on his little patch of illuminated ground.
And that, of course, is the opening analogy of chapter 14 of the Book of the Damned. It is Charles Ford's diagnosis of modern science, particularly astronomy.
It's such a powerful image to start this section with. The watchman is the astronomer. The lantern light is the system, the accepted polite solar system we learn about in school. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, and so on. And the darkness.
That's everything else.
That's the damn.
And that is where we are going today. We are leaving the lantern light. We are stepping out into that torn-up street in the dark.
And I have to say, the stuff we are covering today, chapters 14 through 28, this is where the book goes from weird rains of frogs to something much more structural. We aren't just talking about weather anymore. We are talking about the architecture of the solar system itself.
We are. Ford is essentially arguing that the solar system isn't a clean, empty vacuum with a few planets orbiting on a schedule. He's arguing that it is crowded. It is, well, it's a traffic jam. Yeah. It is filled with what he calls dark bodies, debris, derelict worlds, and things that simply refuse to be lit up by the watchman's lantern.
So our mission for this deep dive is to explore this outer darkness. We're going to look at the phantom planets, the wheels of light in the ocean, the frozen stones, and the footprints that go over roofs.
And the focus is strictly on this middle section of the book. We're putting aside the rains of fish from the earlier chapters and looking specifically at the astronomical and the structural anomalies.
Okay, let's start with this concept of dark bodies, because When I first read this, my mind immediately went to modern astrophysics, dark matter, black holes. But that's not really what Fort means, is it?
Not quite, though there are some interesting parallels. Ford starts by pointing out what he sees as a massive hypocrisy in the way 19th century astronomy was conducted. You see, astronomers act as the gatekeepers of reality. They decide what is allowed to exist in the sky.
They issue the permits.
Exactly. They have a velvet rope. And the funny thing is they actually do allow for dark, unseen bodies. They admit they exist. For example, consider the star Algol. It's a variable star. It gets dimmer and brighter on a regular cycle.
Right.
The accepted explanation, even in Fort's time, was that Algol has a dark companion, a dead star or a massive planet that orbits it and blocks the light periodically. An eclipse, basically.
So a dark body in space is scientifically acceptable.
It is acceptable there. And it's also acceptable in the form of dark nebulae. Professor Barnard, who was one of the most respected astronomers of that era, wrote extensively about dark patches in the sky that just blotted out the stars behind them. So seeing a dark thing, or deducing a dark thing, is technically permitted by the system.
But only if it stays in its lane.
Precisely. If a dark body is light years away and behaves according to nice, clean mathematical models, it's fine, it's sanctioned. But if you claim to see a dark body crossing the sun, something right here in our own neighborhood, something that isn't on the official map of the solar system, that is heresy. That is damned.
And this brings us to the absolute saga of the planet Vulcan.
A tragedy in 3 parts. A real scientific drama.
Now, just to be totally clear for you listening, because I know we have sci-fi fans out there, we are not talking about Mr. Spock. We are not talking about Star Trek.
No, we are talking about a hypothetical planet that was believed by the smartest people on Earth to exist between Mercury and the Sun.
This wasn't some fringe theory from a conspiracy pamphlet. This was like the holy grail of 19th century astronomy.
To understand why this was such a big deal, we have to talk about Urbain Le Verrier. In the mid-1800s, Le Verrier was essentially the rock star of science. He was the high priest. And he earned that title because he performed what many considered a miracle.
He discovered the planet Neptune.
But he didn't just spot it through a telescope. That's the key here. That's what made him a legend. He discovered it with a pen and paper.
That's the ultimate flex, right? I found a planet using math.
It really was. He looked at the orbit of Uranus. He saw that Uranus was wobbling. It wasn't following the path that Isaac Newton's laws of gravity said it should. So Le Verrier sat down, crunched the numbers, and said, the only explanation is that there is another unseen massive body pulling on Uranus from the darkness. He calculated the coordinates, sent them to an observatory in Berlin, and told them exactly where to look.
And they looked.
And boom, there it was, Neptune, exactly where he said it would be. It was maybe the greatest validation of Newtonian physics ever.
So this guy is untouchable now. He has proven that the math is perfect, the system works.
He is the authority. So a few years later, Le Verrier turns his attention to Mercury. And guess what?
Mercury is wobbling too.
Exactly. The orbit of Mercury had a perihelion precession. Basically, its orbital path was shifting in a way that couldn't be fully explained by the gravity of the known planets. It was a tiny anomaly, but it was there. So Le Verrier does what Le Verrier does. He trusts the math. He says, there must be a planet inside the orbit of Mercury, a planet we haven't seen yet because it's so close to the sun that it's usually blinded by the glare.
And he names it Vulcan.
He names it Vulcan. The scientific community is ready. The textbooks are practically being reprinted. They just need one thing.
They need a sighting. They need the watchman to shine the lantern on it.
Enter Dr. Lescarbault.
I love this part of the story because Lescarbault is such an underdog. He's not running the Royal Observatory in Greenwich. He's a country doctor living in Orgères, France, a tiny little village.
He's an amateur. He's got a modest telescope. He's a carpenter in his spare time, and he just loves watching the sky. And on March 26, 1859, he's observing the sun, and he sees it.
Describe what he saw.
He saw a small, perfectly round black object entering the face of the sun. Now, he knew it wasn't a sunspot. Sunspots are irregular. They have penumbras. They don't move like planets. This was a solid body, and he tracked it. He timed its transit across the solar disk.
He knew he had found Le Verrier's planet.
He suspected it. He wrote a letter to Le Verrier, and this is where the story gets cinematic. Le Verrier, the great man of Paris, the superstar, travels to this tiny village of Orgères to confront the doctor. And by all accounts, Le Verrier was not nice about it. He was arrogant. He grilled Lescarbault.
It was an interrogation.
It was. Le Verrier demanded to see his equipment. He looked at the doctor's chronometer, his clock, and mocked it. He said something like, "You're timing a planetary transit with this old thing." He checked the doctor's notes, which were scribbled on a plank of wood. I mean, he was looking for any reason to destroy this man's claim.
But he couldn't.
He couldn't. Lescarbault's observation was consistent. The math worked out. The timing worked. Leverrier, the great skeptic, was converted on the spot. He went back to Paris and announced to the world that Vulcan had been found. Lescarbault was given the Legion of Honor. He became a hero.
Vulcan is real. It's on the map.
Until he refused to show up again.
And this is the crux of the problem, isn't it?
This is everything. The system demands regularity. If Vulcan is a planet, it follows an orbit. If it follows an orbit, we can predict exactly when it will transit the sun again. The astronomers calculated the return dates. They set up their telescopes. They waited.
And nothing happened.
The sun remained empty. The dates came and went. Vulcan stood them up.
So what does the system do? Do they say, maybe our understanding of orbits is wrong? Do they say, maybe there's something weird going on that we don't understand?
No. They do what the watchman does. They turn off the light. They decided that since Vulcan didn't behave, it didn't exist. They turned on Lescarbault. They said, "Oh, the country doctor. He must have hallucinated. He must have seen a round sunspot and got confused. He's an amateur."
They gaslit him after giving him the highest honor in France?
They erased him. Vulcan was damned. He was excluded from the accepted reality. And by the way, we now know that Mercury's wobble is explained by Einstein's theory of general relativity. But that was decades away.
Yeah.
At the time, they just threw the data out.
But wait, Fort points out that Lescarbault wasn't the only one. This is the part that blows my mind. It wasn't just one guy in France. There was a whole list of people.
Fort calls them the advance guard. He lists observers like Watson, Swift, Frisch, Stark, Decupis. These weren't all amateurs. Many were professional astronomers who saw dark bodies crossing the sun or glowing objects near the sun at various times.
Let's talk about the eclipse of 1878, because this feels like the smoking gun that Fort uses to hammer his point home.
This is a critical incident. July 29, 1878. A total solar eclipse sweeping across the American West. Now, for you listening, a total eclipse is the absolute best time to find a planet like Vulcan. The sun is blocked out by the moon, the sky goes dark, and you can see the stars and planets that are normally hidden by the sun's glare.
So everyone is looking. All the big guns are out there.
Everyone is looking. And you have two very prominent, very respected astronomers, Professor Watson, who was observing from Rawlins, Wyoming, and Professor Swift, observing from Denver, Colorado.
Hundreds of miles apart.
Hundreds of miles apart. Independent observations, and both of them report seeing two shining objects near the sun. Objects that were red, objects that had planetary disks.
They weren't stars.
Watson and Swift knew the stars. They knew the constellations like you know your own street. These objects were not on the charts. They were convinced, absolutely convinced that they had seen intermercurial planets. Maybe Vulcan, maybe Vulcan's brother.
So you have two pros. Independent verification during a total eclipse. That should be a slam dunk. Case closed.
It should be. But again, the observations didn't fit the theoretical orbit Leverrier had calculated years before. And when they couldn't find them the next night, because, frankly, finding a tiny planet near the sun without an eclipse is incredibly hard, the system attacked.
What did they say this time?
They said Watson and Swift were eluded.
Eluded? What does that even mean?
It's a polite 19th century way of saying hypnotized or delusional. They claimed these professional star mappers had mistaken the stars Theta and Zeta of Cancer for planets.
That's just insulting. That's like telling a professional driver he mistook a stop sign for a pedestrian.
Exactly. But Fort's point is that the system operates like a mass hypnosis. Astronomers are trained to see only what is supposed to be there. When Watson and Swift saw something else, something wild, the system had to correct the error, not by updating the map, but by erasing the observation, by questioning the sanity of the observers.
So we have dark bodies, we have lost planets. But Fort takes this idea of stuff in the dark, and he goes so much bigger. He doesn't just think there are a few stray rocks or a hidden planet. He introduces a concept that, I have to admit, took me a while to wrap my head around. The Super Sargasso Sea.
It is one of his most audacious and, I think, magnificent theories.
When I hear Sargasso Sea, I immediately think of the ocean, Bermuda Triangle, all that.
Which is exactly the image you want you to have. The real Sargasso Sea is in the North Atlantic. It's a unique phenomenon. It's an area of water bounded by 4 powerful ocean currents. The currents spin around it, creating this huge gyre, but the center remains relatively still and stagnant.
So everything just drifts there and gets stuck.
Right. Seaweed, driftwood, debris, lost ships in the old stories. It all congregates in this calm center and just floats there. It's a collection point, a cosmic junk pile in the ocean.
And Fort argues that the Earth has one of these in the sky.
Not in the atmosphere, but gravitationally. He suggests there is a neutral zone above the Earth, a region of gravitational equilibrium.
Okay, let's pause and unpack the physics of that for a second. How can there be a neutral zone in gravity? Isn't gravity always pulling down?
Think of it like a cosmic tug of war. You have the Earth pulling things down with its gravity, of course, but you also have the sun pulling things away. You have the moon pulling. And crucially, the rotation of the Earth creates centrifugal force, which is constantly flinging things outwards. Fort argues, and modern physics actually supports this with concepts like Lagrange points, that there are regions where these forces balance out.
A sweet spot.
A spot where if you placed an object, it wouldn't fall to Earth and it wouldn't fly off into space. It would just sit there, hovering, caught in this gravitational eddy.
So Fort thinks this zone is just full of junk.
He thinks it's a super Sargasso Sea. He argues that over millions of years, things have been swept up from Earth dust, leaves, insects, maybe even animals, by massive storms or whirlwinds, and they get stuck in this zone. And things coming from space meteors, cosmic dust, who knows what else gets stuck there too before they can hit the Earth.
It's a celestial attic, a very, very messy attic.
Precisely. And just like an attic, sometimes things fall out. If there's a gravitational storm or a jolt in the system from a passing body, debris shakes loose and falls to the surface.
This is how he explains all those weird falls we talked about in previous dives, isn't it? The showers of frogs, the showers of fish.
Yes. The standard scientific explanation is always a whirlwind. Oh, a tornado sucked up a pond of frogs and dropped them here. But Fort asks the hard questions. Why only frogs? A tornado is messy. It should drop frogs, mud, sticks, water, algae. But if you have a frog zone in the Super Sargasso Sea, a place where a school of frogs got stuck and maybe even bred, and that area gets shaken, you get a pure, unadulterated fall of frogs.
But in this section of the book, he focuses on something even stranger than frogs. He talks about leaves.
The vegetable matter. Chapter 8. This is a great example of his method.
Leaves falling from the sky seems innocuous. I mean, leaves blow around. That happens.
Yeah, they do. But Fort cites cases that don't fit the wind theory. He talks about a case in France in 1889 and another in Scotland in 1869. Dead, dried leaves falling from the sky in massive quantities.
But again, the skeptics just say it's wind, a strong updraft.
But Fort looks closer. He digs into the reports. He points out that in some of these cases, the leaves were described as exotic or unfamiliar to the region, and they fell on clear, calm days with no storm in sight to carry them.
So if they didn't come from a forest on Earth...
This is where Fort gets truly imaginative. He suggests supergeographical regions.
Supergeographical, you mean land in the sky, floating islands?
Why not? If this Super Sargasso Sea is stable, why couldn't dust and soil accumulate there over eons? Why couldn't life find a way? He implies that maybe there are forests floating in the neutral zone, islands of vegetation suspended above us, and in the autumn of the Super Sargasso Sea, the leaves fall down on us.
That is a wild image. Instead of empty space, there's a jungle hanging over our heads.
And not just leaves. He talks about the silk.
Angel hair? I've heard of that phenomenon.
Yes. Reports from Pernambuco in 1821 and later in Europe, showers of a strange, fibrous, silk-like substance. Sometimes it covers the ground like a web for miles.
And it's not spider webs.
The quantity is usually too vast. Ford speculates. Is it waste product? Is it cargo? Or, and this is a fascinating idea, is it the breakdown of something? Imagine a super construction, a ship or a station that has been derelict in the Super Sargasso Sea for centuries, rotting away, shedding its insulation or its structure, and that rains down on us as silk.
It completely changes the whole feeling of being on Earth. If you believe the system, we are on a rock spinning in a clean, empty void. If you believe Fort, we are living underneath a massive, stagnant dump that occasionally leaks on us.
It challenges the philosophy of positivism.
Break that down for us. Positivism versus Fort's idea, Intermediatism.
Positivism is the core philosophy of 19th century science. It's the desire to categorize everything strictly. This is a planet, that is a star. This is true, that is false. This is here, that is there. It wants clear, distinct lines, sharp division.
This wants the lantern light, black and white.
Exactly. Fort proposes intermediatism. He argues that in the real universe, nothing is distinct. Everything merges. Where does the Earth's atmosphere end and space begin? It's a fade, not a line. Where does the Earth's gravity stop? It doesn't. It just gets weaker and weaker. We are in the quasi-existence, where everything is in a state of becoming something else.
And this leads to that line, the line that everyone quotes from this book, the one that sticks with you.
We are property.
It sends a shiver down my spine every time. We are property.
It is the ultimate conclusion of Intermediatism. Ford is suggesting that the Earth is not an independent, sovereign world. It is owned, it is cultivated. Maybe we are a farm. Maybe we are a preserve.
A zoo, a cosmic ant farm.
Or a colony. And this Super Sargasso Sea, these dark bodies, they are the evidence of the owners. Or perhaps they are the fences. Intermediatism suggests that we merge with this outer system. We are just a part of a much larger, darker estate.
So if we are property, if we are a farm,
Yeah.
then there must be farmers. Or at least traffic, activity.
Exactly. If there is a Super Sargasso Sea, there must be things passing through it. In chapter 16, Fort discusses exactly that. He calls them angels, but he doesn't mean men with wings and halos.
He means biological entities, or maybe ships.
He cites a report by Mr. Reed in 1851. Reed was observing the sky through a telescope, and he saw a host of luminous bodies, hundreds of them, just floating across his field of view.
And let me guess the scientific explanation. Seeds. Pollen.
Seeds. Or ice crystals. Always something distinct, something small, something earthly and mundane. But Reed was an experienced observer. He said they didn't move like seeds in the wind. They moved with a kind of intention.
Fort uses a phrase here that's really striking, super Tamerlanes.
Yes. Tamerlane was a Mongol conqueror, a ravager. Fort wonders if these hosts in the sky are migrating armies, celestial beings passing through the neutral zone on their way to some other conquest, ignoring the Earth the way an army ignores an anthill on the side of the road.
It's terrifying to think of the sky as a highway for migrating armies. But there's another observation that feels less like an army and more like a predator. A crow on the moon.
Ah, the observation by Schroeder in 1788. This is a classic 14 case because it all hinges on a single specific detail. Schroeder was observing the moon and he saw a vast, dark thing. He described it as being poised like a crow hovering over the lunar surface.
But the key isn't just that he saw a dark blob, it's the shadow, right?
Correct. He noted that the object cast a shadow. Now, the scientific explanation, provided later by Professor Service, was that Schroeder simply saw the shadow of a mountain, a lunar mountain. Makes sense, right?
Okay, but geometry tells us something about shadows.
Exactly. A mountain is attached to the ground. Its shadow starts at its base. It's connected. But Schroeder described a detached shadow, a round shadow that was separate from the object itself.
Like a ball hovering over the ground. There's a gap between the ball and its shadow.
Exactly. To see a detached round shadow implies a sphere or a craft hovering above the surface of the moon. A mountain cannot do that. So Fort asks, what was hovering over the moon? A craft. A giant biological entity taking a rest.
We have crows on the moon, armies of angels, and then we have the dark days. I had never heard of these before reading this book, The Dark Day of New England, 1819.
These are phenomena that history has largely forgotten, but they were deeply terrifying at the time. Events where the sky goes pitch black in the middle of the day. And we aren't talking about a thunderstorm darkness. We are talking about midnight at noon.
People had to light candles. Chickens went to roost.
Yes. The 1819 event is a prime example. The standard explanation, the one you'll find in the old textbooks, is smoke. Oh, there were forest fires in Canada, and the wind blew the smoke down.
It sounds plausible on the surface.
Until you look at the concomitants, the things that happened with the darkness. In 1819, along with the darkness, there were reports of strange lights flashing in the sky. There were falls of a black soot-like substance that didn't analyze as normal ash. And this is the big one, there were earthquake shocks.
Wait, forest fires don't cause earthquakes?
Exactly. Smoke doesn't shake the ground. So Fort proposes a different theory. He calls it a shadow of a dark body.
Explain that.
Imagine a massive, dark, planetary body, one of those damn things the Watchman ignores. Imagine it passes very close to the Earth.
A near collision.
A near approach.
Yeah.
It's big enough to block out the sun, causing the darkness. It's massive enough that its gravity tugs on the Earth's crust, causing the earthquake shocks. And maybe it's close enough to dump some of its own debris, that strange black substance, onto us as it passes.
That fits the data perfectly. Darkness plus gravity plus debris.
It fits much better than smoke. But it requires you to accept that there are massive invisible worlds passing within screaming distance of our planet, which, of course, the system will not allow.
It's the Intermediatism again. The Earth isn't sealed off in a bubble. We are bumping into things, or things are bumping into us. Which leads us to perhaps the most concrete evidence of contact in this section, the Dhurmsala event.
Chapter XXX. This is the climax of the visitor theme for me. It happened in India, at Dhurmsala, on July 14th, 1860.
So stones fall from the sky. We know this happens. Meteorites. It's a solved phenomenon.
Right. But meteorites follow rules. They enter the atmosphere at incredibly high speeds, tens of thousands of miles per hour. Friction with the air generates immense heat. That's why we see them as shooting stars. When they hit the ground, they are hot. Sometimes the surface is molten.
That's standard physics 101.
So listen to the report from Dhurmsala. Massive stones fell. But the witnesses didn't say they were hot. They said the stones were moist, and they were coated in ice. Ice. The coolies who picked them up said their fingers were benumbed by the cold, so cold they could barely hold them.
Okay, hold on. How do you get a frozen meteorite? If it falls from space, it burns up. The ice should be the first thing to go.
Exactly. If it falls from deep space at high velocity, the ice should melt instantly. Court argues that for a stone to land covered in ice, it couldn't have fallen through the atmosphere at high speed.
So it wasn't a meteor.
Ford suggests it must have dropped from a stationary position, or a slow-moving one. Perhaps from a place in that Super Sargasso Sea where it had been sitting, freezing in the absolute zero of space, accumulating moisture from surrounding vapors. It fell like a stone dropped from a bridge, not like a bullet from a gun.
That's already weird. But the story gets weirder. That same evening, the deputy commissioner of Dhurmsala saw something in the sky.
Yes, he reported seeing lights. He described them as fire balloons, but noted they weren't actually balloons. They were lights that appeared, moved around, went out, and then reappeared somewhere else.
Fort connects these two things, the frozen stone and the lights, in a way that just gives me goosebumps.
He creates a narrative. A frozen stone falls. Maybe it was cargo. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe something broke off a ship. And then, that evening, lights appear in the sky, circling, searching.
A search party.
A retrieval mission. Fort uses the term trespassers.
Trespassers. I love that word choice. It's so evocative.
It goes back to the idea that we are property. If the Earth is owned by a great power, maybe there are other smaller powers, smugglers, poachers, trespassers, who sneak in. They come down to explore, or to hunt, or to hide. But they have to be careful. They are warned off. The lights at Dhurmsala might have been these trespassers, frantically looking for their lost object before the owners found out they were here.
It turns the sky into this dramatic political arena. It's not just stars and gas. It's territories, borders, smugglers, and police.
It makes the universe feel alive and dangerous and full of intrigue.
Speaking of vehicles and dangerous territories, we have to talk about the water. Because Fort finds evidence of these constructions in the ocean too, and these are some of the weirdest reports in the whole book.
The luminous wheels. The most unsettling imagery in the book for me.
There's the story of the Bintang, a steamship in 1909 in the Straits of Malacca.
Captain Gabe. He reports seeing a vast, revolving wheel of light. And when we say vast, we mean it. The center was on the horizon, but the spokes of light reached almost to the ship. It covered half the sky. It wasn't just a glow. It has long armed spokes of light radiating from a central hub, and the whole thing was spinning steadily, mechanically.
Now, I know what the skeptics say. Phosphorescent plankton, bioluminescence.
Sure. And plankton creates glows, no doubt. But plankton does not form geometric wheels with spokes. Plankton does not rotate at a steady mechanical speed for half an hour. And plankton certainly doesn't submerge and rise like a controlled object, which some reports describe.
There was another case in the Persian Gulf, right? That one was even stranger.
Yes. Multiple reports from ships in the Persian Gulf. Sailors saw giant luminous wheels spinning under the surface of the water. The light was shining up through the depths.
So we have wheels in the water, but we also have dirigibles in the sky, long before humans invented dirigibles.
This is chapter 25. Fort lists sightings of torpedo-shaped or cylindrical bodies. The most famous is the auroral beam of November 17, 1882. It was seen all over Europe.
Scientists called it a meteor or an auroral phenomenon, something natural.
But look at the description. It's torpedo-shaped, it had a dark nucleus, a body, and it moved majestically.
Majestically. That implies slow, controlled movement, not a flash of light.
Exactly. Too fast for a cloud, but way, way too slow for a meteor. Meteors flash and are gone in a second. This thing took its time crossing the sky. Dr. Gronem, a scientist at the time, tried to argue it was meteoric matter arranged in a line by some magnetic force.
A conga line of meteors.
Essentially. But Fort asked the obvious question. Why would meteoric debris arrange itself into a perfect torpedo shape with a dark center and cruise slowly across the sky? It defies physics.
It sounds like a ship, a superconstruction.
Exactly. Navigable superconstructions. Fort suggests we are being watched from the sky and from the sea. These luminous wheels in the ocean might be submersible versions of the airships. Or maybe they are the same craft, capable of both environments.
It's so unsettling. You look up, you're watched. You look down into the dark water, you're watched. And the things falling on us aren't just stones and ice. This is the part that turns my stomach a bit. Part 6. Blood.
Showers of blood. It sounds biblical, but Fort treats it as data. Chapter 27 is full of reports of red rains from all over the world.
Now, I know the standard explanation here, too. Sand. Red sand from the Sahara, blown across the Mediterranean, mixing with rain to look red.
And in many cases, that is probably true. Fort admits that. He's not unreasonable. He's not saying every red rain is supernatural, but he points out the anomalies, the cases that don't fit. There are red rains that don't look like sand under a microscope.
What do they look like?
They contain vegetable cells. Or they smell like charred animal matter. Or, and this is gross, they're described as having the consistency of flesh or gore.
There's the case at Tarbes, France that you mentioned.
Yes, this is a crucial detail because of recurrence. A shower of red matter fell. And then, a few days later, in the exact same spot, it fell again.
Why does recurrence matter so much?
Because a whirlwind is chaotic. If a whirlwind sucks up red dust in Africa and drops it in France, the chances of it returning to the exact same spot days later to drop the rest of it are astronomically low. Winds is random.
But if you have a stationary source...
Exactly. If something is hovering in that Super Sargasso Sea parked overhead, it makes perfect sense. The ship or the super geographical region is sitting there. It dumps waste or it bleeds or it sheds material, and gravity pulls it straight down to the same spot on Earth, day after day.
It implies that the sky isn't empty space. It's a place where things hang out long enough to rot or bleed.
It leads to some grotesque speculations. Fort wonders if there are super arteries in the sky that get severed, or if these falls are the result of aerial battles between the trespassers and the owners. The blood and flesh falling down are the debris of a war we can't see.
From the sky to the ground. We have to finish with perhaps the most famous story in this entire section, the Devil's Footprints, chapter 28.
This story gave me actual chills when I first read it. It is one of the most famous, unexplained mysteries in British history.
Set the scene for us.
South Devonshire, England. February 1855 is a harsh winter. A heavy snowstorm hits the region. We're talking crisp, deep, undisturbed snow. The next morning, the residents wake up, go outside, and they see tracks.
But not just a few tracks in a garden.
No. These tracks covered an expanse of over 100 miles through multiple towns.
And the shape.
They were described as hoof-like or U-shaped, about 4 inches long. But the strangest thing was the gait. They were in a single line.
Like a tightrope walker.
Exactly. 1 foot directly in front of the other. Most animals, dogs, cats, badgers, whatever, they have a staggered gait. Their feet are side by side. This thing walked in a perfect unilinear file.
And the distance. 100 miles in a single night through deep snow.
It's impossible for any known animal. But the weirdest part, the part that makes this so baffling, is where they went.
They didn't just stay on the road.
No, they went everywhere. They went through open fields. They went into enclosed gardens. They went over houses.
Over houses?
Yes. The tracks would go up to a 14-foot wall, disappear, and reappear on the other side. The snow on top of the wall was undisturbed. It was as if the creature had just hopped or flown over the wall without touching it. And they were found on the roofs of houses, leading up to drain pipes, going across the tiles, and coming down the other side.
So naturally, the locals were terrified. They saw hoof prints on their roofs. They called them the Devil's Footprints.
It fits the profile. Yep. Cloven hoof, supernatural ability to pass through walls. The panic was real.
So the scientists step in. The watchmen arrive with their lanterns to explain it all away. And what did they say?
This is a perfect example of the watchmen refusing to see the dark. Professor Owen, the great biologist of the era, declared that they were the tracks of a badger.
A badger.
A badger.
I've seen a badger. They are low to the ground. They are chubby. You're telling me a badger walked 100 miles in a straight line, hopped over 14-foot walls, and tightrope walked across snowy roofs?
It is laughable. A badger leaves a specific waddling track. It doesn't walk in a single line. It doesn't scale walls without disturbing the snow. But Owen had to fit the data into the system. Badgers exist. Demons do not. Visitors from the Super Sargasso Sea do not. Therefore, it must be a badger, even if it has to be a magical, acrobatic badger from the circus.
It really highlights that hypocrisy of science theme again. They'd rather believe in magic badger than admit they don't know what made the tracks.
Fort points out that they actually tried to alter the data. Scientists started claiming the tracks were clawed to fit the badger theory, even though the eyewitnesses clearly described them as hoof-like. They adjusted the facts to save the theory.
So what does Fort think made them?
He doesn't give a definitive answer, of course, but he points to the behavior. The creature surmounted obstacles without breaking stride. It covered vast distances. It seemed unconcerned with human boundaries like walls and roofs. It suggests a visitor.
A trespasser.
Yes, something that could hop or fly or levitate over walls and roofs. Maybe it came down from the neutral zone, explored the terrain, ignoring our walls because it didn't understand them or care about them, and then presumably went back up.
Or it's still here.
That is the uncomfortable thought, isn't it?
It fits the whole picture we painted today. We are being visited, we are being watched, we are being walked upon.
And we're being lied to by the very systems we trust to tell us what's real. Or at least the system is keeping the shutters closed.
So let's bring this all together. We've talked about dark bodies blocking the sun, frozen stones from stationary platforms, luminous wheels in the sea, blood from the sky, and footprints that go over roofs. What is the big takeaway from this section of the book?
It brings us back to the philosophy of the damned. We are moving from exclusionism, shutting things out because they don't fit the current model, to inclusionism. Fort is asking us to widen the circle of the lantern.
To see the bonfires in the dark.
Precisely. If we accept these data, if we accept that the solar system is crowded, that the sky is a busy place, that we are property, then our place in the universe changes profoundly. We are not the masters of a lonely rock. We are perhaps the livestock on a cosmic farm, or the natives on a protected preserve.
And the dam data, the blood, the stones, the footprints, that's just the evidence of the fences. Or the keepers making their rounds.
Or the feed being dropped into the trough.
Well, on that deeply comforting thought, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. It's a lot to process. The universe is a lot stranger and a lot more crowded than we've been led to believe.
It certainly is. Yeah. And I hope this encourages everyone to look at the sky and the data a little differently tonight.
I want to thank everyone for listening to this exploration of chapters 14 through 28 of the Book of the Damned. It's been a wild ride.
Indeed. Keep looking up.
And watch out for falling rocks.
And badgers on the roof.
See you next time.